Hospitals are supposed to be places of healing, places where the sick find comfort, where the dying find dignity, and where the living cling to hope. But in Birmingham, England, inside an old wing of the city's general hospital, there was a room so feared that even the nurses whispered about it in hushed voices. Patients who entered room 12 often didn't sleep through the night. Some woke screaming, others begged to be moved, and a few swore they saw a tall man in black, standing silently in the corner, watching. Doctors dismissed it as stress, medication side effects, or hallucinations brought on by illness. But the staff who worked the night shifts knew something darker was happening there. This isn't folklore. This isn't a campfire ghost story. This is a chilling, true account whispered among hospital staff for decades. The haunting of room 12, and the terrifying presence they called the Shadow Man. That it was the winter of 1991 when Lisa Morgan, a 22-year-old nurse, fresh out of training, began her first graveyard shift at Birmingham General Hospital. The city was wrapped in cold fog that night, the kind that clung to the street lamps and turned every shadow into something sinister. Lisa clutched her coat tighter as she hurried through the side entrance, already nervous about her first long shift in the old wing. The hospital itself was a towering grey building, built in the late 1800s and modernized over the decades. But some corridors still bore the weight of history. High ceilings, long echoing halls, peeling paint that revealed older layers beneath. Lisa had heard rumors from the senior nurses during orientation, but she brushed them off. Ghost stories always surrounded old hospitals. It was part of the atmosphere, a way for burned-out staff to inject a little drama into their endless nights. Still, as she walked past the dimly lit wards toward the nurses' station, she couldn't ignore the weight pressing down on her chest. It was a suffocating stillness, the kind that made her footsteps sound too loud on the linoleum floor. She signed in, greeted the senior nurse with a nervous smile, and took her chart. That's when she noticed something odd. "Room dozy," the senior nurse said, almost under her breath, when Lisa asked where to start. "Patient came in late this afternoon. You'll be checking vitals, making sure she's comfortable." Lisa nodded, not yet aware of the significance of that room number. Her first rounds went smoothly. She checked on an elderly man recovering from surgery, adjusted the 4 for a middle-aged woman with pneumonia, and reassured a frightened child who had broken his leg. The rhythm of the ward began to calm her nerves, but the entire time, she felt the pull of room 12 at the end of the hall. When she finally opened the door, the first thing that struck her was how cold it was. The air inside seemed several degrees lower than the rest of the ward, enough to make her breath puff faintly in the glow of the fluorescent lights. She shivered and stepped in. The patient, a frail woman in her 60s, lay awake in bed, eyes wide and restless. "Good evening, Mrs. Peterson," Lisa said softly. "How are you feeling?" The woman's gaze flicked nervously to the corner of the room. "Do you see him?" she whispered. Lisa frowned. "See who?" "The tall man," Mrs. Peterson said, her voice trembling. "He's been standing there since they brought me in." Lisa glanced toward the corner. Nothing, just the shadow of the wardrobe cast by the dim bedside lamp. She smiled, doing her best to sound reassuring. Sometimes new environments can play tricks on our minds. "You're safe here." But the woman shook her head violently, gripping Lisa's wrist. "He's real. He doesn't blink. He just watches." Lisa stayed with her until she finally drifted into a restless sleep. But unease gnawed at her. When she stepped out of the room, the senior nurse, Margaret, was waiting. Her expression was unreadable. "She saw him, didn't she?" Margaret asked quietly. Lisa froze. "What do you mean?" Margaret sighed. "Don't worry about it. Just never linger in there after dark. And if the bed starts shaking, don't touch it." Lisa laughed nervously, waiting for Margaret to smile back to reveal it was a joke. But the older nurse didn't. She just walked away, leaving Lisa standing in the corridor, her skin prickling. Around 2:45 a.m., the ward was silent except for the hum of the lights and the distant beeping of monitors. Lisa was making notes at the nurse's station when she heard it. A faint metallic rattle, like a bed frame vibrating. She froze, straining her ears. The sound grew louder, rhythmic, shaking. It was coming from room 12. Her heart pounded as she hurried down the hall, her shoes squeaking against the floor. She pushed open the door and gasped. The bed was shaking violently, the metal legs scraping against the linoleum. Mrs. Peterson lay frozen, clutching the sheets, her eyes wide with terror. "Make it stop," the woman screamed. Lisa rushed forward, instinct taking over. She grabbed the bed rail, and instantly, the shaking ceased. The silence that followed was absolute, oppressive. Lisa's breath came in ragged gasps as she looked around the room. Nothing moved. The corner was empty, yet the cold in the room deepened, crawling into her bones. "See," Mrs. Peterson whispered, her voice hoarse. "He doesn't like you here." Lisa fled the room, her hands trembling, her rational mind scrambling for explanations. Malfunctioning equipment, an earthquake tremor. But deep down, she knew none of that was true. She knew she had touched something she shouldn't have. When she told Margaret what had happened, the older nurse paled. She sat Lisa down and poured her a cup of tea with hands that shook slightly. "I told you not to touch the bed," she muttered. "You've felt it now." "I told you not to touch the bed," she muttered. "You've felt it now." Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the bed rattling, felt the icy draft against her skin, and remembered the look of raw terror in Mrs. Peterson's eyes. It was only her first night on shift, and already she was marked. Lisa Morgan had convinced herself she could survive the rest of her training at Birmingham General if she simply avoided room 12. But hospitals never allow their staff the luxury of avoidance, and remembered the look of raw terror in Mrs. Peterson's eyes. It was only her first night on shift, and already she was marked. The second night of Lisa's graveyard shift began the same way as the first. Fog clung to the streets of Birmingham, the kind that swallowed street lamps and blurred the edges of the hospital's towering facade. She had barely slept that day, her dreams restless, haunted by whispers and dark figures hovering at the edges of her vision. By 11 o'clock p.m., the ward was quiet. Margaret greeted her with a tired nod, but there was something sharper in her eyes tonight, as though she were watching Lisa closely, measuring her reactions. "You're back," Margaret said softly, as if she hadn't expected her to return. "Of course," Lisa forced a laugh. "It's my job, isn't it?" The older nurse said nothing, only handed her the night's patient list. Lisa's stomach dropped when she saw the assignment. Room 12. Whitell's check at midnight. Her hands trembled slightly as she tucked the clipboard under her arm. Margaret noticed but didn't comment. She simply muttered, "Be quick about it, don't linger." The corridor to room 12 felt longer tonight. Every step echoed unnaturally, as though the walls were amplifying the sound of her footsteps. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, buzzing faintly. When she opened the door, the cold air wrapped around her instantly, sharp enough to make her teeth chatter. Mrs. Peterson was awake, staring at the corner again. Her lips moved soundlessly, whispering words Lisa couldn't hear. "Good evening," Lisa said cautiously, checking the chart. "How are you feeling tonight?" The woman's eyes shifted to Lisa, then back to the corner. "He knows you now," she whispered. "He followed you yesterday." Lisa froze. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Peterson shook her head violently. "Don't ask questions. Don't speak to him. Don't." Her words were cut off by the sound of metal groaning. Lisa looked down and saw the four stand trembling, not shaking wildly like the bed the night before, but vibrating, a low metallic hum that resonated through the floor. Lisa backed away slowly, her breath quickening. The air grew heavier, and then, from the corner of the room, came the sound of breathing. Deep, steady, deliberate. Lisa turned her head. At first, she saw nothing but shadows, the wardrobe's outline, the curtain pulled half across the window. But then her eyes adjusted. There was a figure standing there, tall, motionless, entirely black, as though carved from the absence of light itself. His head nearly brushed the ceiling. Lisa's heart thundered in her chest. She blinked, and he was gone. Only the empty corner remained, but the breathing continued. "Go," Mrs. Peterson hissed, "before he makes you stay." Lisa fled the room, slamming the door shut behind her. Her legs shook so badly she nearly collapsed against the wall when she told Margaret what she had seen. The older nurse didn't react with disbelief. Instead, she sighed heavily, as though a weight had settled deeper on her shoulders. "He's chosen you," Margaret said. "It happens sometimes. Once you see him, he'll keep showing himself, not just in the room, anywhere in the hospital. Sometimes, even outside it." Lisa's voice trembled. "But what is he?" "No one knows," Margaret replied. "Some think he's a remnant of this building's past. Others think he's older. Not a ghost, but something darker, a shadow that feeds on suffering. That room has seen too much death over the years. He doesn't like when people notice him, and you noticed." The rest of the night blurred into a haze of dread. Every creak of the floor, Every flicker of the lights, every shadow stretched to long sent panic racing through Lisa's veins. She thought she saw him in the reflection of a window, a tall black silhouette behind her. When she spun around, the corridor was empty. At 3:17 a.m., the fire alarm went off in the ward. Lisa and Margaret rushed to check the source. Smoke seemed to seep from room 12, but when they entered, there was no fire. Only the patient, Mrs. Peterson, sitting upright, her eyes glassy, murmuring, "He burns, he burns." The room smelled faintly of singed fabric, though nothing was charred. By dawn, Lisa was exhausted, her nerves stretched thin. She drove home with the rising sun in her eyes, telling herself that sleep would reset her mind. But when she unlocked her apartment door and stepped inside, she froze. The smell was there, too faint, smoky, as though the hospital's room 12 had followed her home. That night, Lisa tried to call in sick, but Margaret phoned her directly. "You can't hide," the older nurse said softly. "It doesn't matter if you come to work or not. Once he notices you, he follows." Lisa didn't understand, not fully, until the following week. It was a Thursday when Mrs. Peterson died. Lisa wasn't on duty, but she heard about it from another nurse. The woman had been fine the night before, stable, talking, even laughing a little. But by morning she was gone. Her body was found with her face contorted in sheer terror, her mouth frozen in a silent scream. The official report listed heart failure, but the staff knew better. The night Mrs. Peterson died, several nurses swore they saw the shadowy figure in the hallway, moving slowly from door to door, as though inspecting the patients. One nurse quit the next day, refusing to ever return to the hospital. But inside the reflection, Peterson's last words to her, "He followed you yesterday," had been more of a warning than she realized. Because that night, when Lisa went to brush her teeth in the mirror, she saw him, not behind her, not in the corner of the room, but inside the reflection. The shadow man was standing directly behind her in the glass, towering over her, his faceless head tilted as though studying her. When she spun around, the bathroom was empty. But when she looked back at the mirror, his outline was still there. And this time, he raised his hand, lowly, deliberately, as if waving. Lisa screamed, smashing the mirror with her fist. Shards rained into the sink, cutting her skin. Her neighbors came pounding on the wall, asking if she was okay. She lied, said she slipped, but inside, she knew the truth. The shadow man was no longer confined to room 12. He was with her, and he wasn't leaving.